In today's video, I'll be making two things that hold a special place in my journey.
A ceramic pullover coffee dripper, and a dish that was my first culinary triumph, marine gelato.
What brings them together?
A simple kitchen tool. But how?
Let's start from the beginning. For your next star chef, you need a cutting board, a mandolin, a third pan 200, a knife 400, and a fourth 600. Sorry chef, just to double check, you said I need a third pan 200 and a fourth pan 300? We don't have a fourth 300 in the kitchen, chef. Also a chinois and a bain marie on your way back, please. A chinois? I know that. Je suis chinoise. Je viens de Chine. But
unlike the complicated hotel pen system, there was only one chinois in the kitchen.
But there's more to that chinois, and we'll unpack it later.
When I first thought about creating something inspired by the chinois, the pullover coffee dripper immediately came to mind. A cone-shaped ceramic piece with a practical purpose. I measured the chinois and researched popular pullover designs. The famous V60 has a similar height-to-width ratio as the chinois, which I will base my pullover on. I'm making a tumble tool to make measuring easy peasy. Starting with 1.5 pound.
It's actually kind of hard to tell exactly how much clay I need for this, especially if it's the first time ever. I guess I will just have to try it out.
I'm leaving some clay at the bottom to shape into a disc so it can sit on the cup or pour. Then I carefully open it up and pull up the walls to the right height. Using 1.5 pounds of clay, I managed to get the height and width I wanted. But it was quite a stretch. The base ended up too thin to trim a proper foot, so for the next one, I'm trying 2 pounds instead. I left more clay at the base, making it a lot thicker. Then I recentered the top, opened it up, and poured up the walls again, slowly working it into a cone shape. Although this one has a better base, it wasn't centered properly, and I don't like how the ring part was done. So, moving on. But it didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. The recycled clay wasn't kneaded properly, and I rushed to get the clay up. I'd say it took more than a couple of tries. But isn't there a saying, 7 times the charm? Next, I'm preparing the slip to add some fine details. I've never made slip seriously before. It was always just some wet clay mixed with water whenever I needed it.
But this time, I'm doing it right.
I hydrate the clay overnight.
Alright, who's ready for some mud smoothie? 1, 2, 3.
And passed it through a sieve.
Look at this texture. Wow. So here's the trick to get the slip into the squeeze bottle. In the kitchen, since we're dealing with a lot of puree or sauces that's probably very close to this texture, we use pastry bag. But at home, a regular Ziploc bag should do the trick. And you also need a cylinder of some sort, and that will hold your bag in place. Or if you have someone to help you to do this. So next, you're just gonna scoop this into the bag. Now you take it out of the cylinder, zip it up. I'm going to cut just a tiny little bit. That's a lot better. It can still be quite messy.
Now we're ready for slip drilling, something I've never tried before. To play it safe, I practiced on a plasterboard. Soon I realized that this could happen. So rather than going straight onto the piece, I let the slip sit on the plaster for a few minutes to dry. And then you can actually lift it up. this is so fun! Now that my baby snake lines are sprayed and tucked away, we can move on to the handle. I've always pulled my handles before, but this time I wanted to mimic the more structured shape of a chinois handle. I decided to go with the slab method. I rolled out a slab and carved out the handle using these wood sticks to keep it straight while it firmed up a little more. Meanwhile, it's time to trim the pot. I'm creating a foot ring, which helps lock the pullover in place during use. And of course, I'll cut a hole at the bottom for the coffee to filter through. Then I refined the shape and took off some extra weight. Next, I carefully laid down the slit lines inside the pot, trying to keep them as straight as possible. To make sure they don't come off after drying, I sealed them in place with more slip. By then, the handle has firmed up to the same dryness as the pot. So I attached it with slip and reinforced the joint with 2 small coils. The pot is now wrapped in a plastic bag to dry slowly and avoid cracking. After the dripper is bisque-fired, it's time to glaze. Since there's a hole in the bottom where the glaze usually melts and pools, the choice of glaze is crucial. I'm going with one that I've used a couple times.
It doesn't run very much, which is very important because I really don't have any backup for this one.
I'm waxing the hole and the outside of the dripper, leaving part of it bare. This way it will look more like the chinois I have.
It's also nice to see the color and texture of the clay from time to time. I'm excited to see how this one will turn out.
I didn't have a huge bucket of glaze to dip the whole piece at once, so I had to glaze it in sections. Not ideal, but sometimes you just have to roll with what you've got. Once the piece is all dried and cleaned up, it's in the hand of the kiln god.
I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I like the clay color and the glaze, and the inner lines also look a little better than I expected. If I were to make it again, I'd probably do the handle differently. After the bisque firing, it came out pretty nice and straight because I was doing it upside down like this. But during the glaze firing, where it had to be upright, you can see the fire end just warped downward. But it felt pretty good in the hand. Not as natural or comfortable as the traditional shape, but it's very functional and vaguely looking like a chinois handle. And of course, I had to make a few matching pieces to go with it. Now it's time to put it to the test.
Before we make the coffee, let's get the ice cream done. This particular one is a signature dish from the restaurant I worked at.
It has 2 main components and is made from only 4 ingredients: eggs, salt, sugar, and cream. But the catch is, it takes a little time.
From here, the cured yolks will enter hibernation in the fridge for 2 to 3 weeks. It's time to wake them up. I take them out of the container and wash off the salt and sugar. Then I shower them with another coat of sugar and place them on a rack to dry overnight. They can be stored in sugar for quite some time. Moving on to the gelato base. First, I heat up some cream and whip up a meringue with egg whites and sugar. When the cream is just at boiling point, I turn off the heat and fold in the meringue. Then I pass it through the chinois to achieve a smooth texture.
The meringue gelato was the first dish I learned to make as a chef. Back in the days, we used to do hundreds of those cured yolks and like 12 gallons of this gelato base at a time.
Once the base is cooled to room temp, I store it in the fridge overnight to get it ready for the ice cream machine.
I don't have a restaurant-grade gelato machine at home, but I've got this little guy. Let's see if we can get a similar texture.
This process is straightforward. Pour in a cooked base and let it churn for 20 to 25 minutes. Once the right consistency is reached, I take out the ice cream and store it in the freezer for a couple hours.
That's it. Both components are prepped. But to make it look nice, we still got one more skill to master.
To make the perfect canal, you need warm water, an oval-shaped spoon, and an ice-cold plate. It's important to temper your ice cream. Let it sit for a couple of minutes so your spoon glides through easily. Learning to make a canal felt like my first little triumph in the kitchen, a sign that I might have a place there after all. The chinois, named after the shape of a Chinaman's head, a stereotype steeped in outdated ideas, soon became my second hand in the kitchen. The meringue gelato, made from just 4 ingredients, with a little creativity and effort, something simple can become extraordinary. They are the reminders that we have the agency to redefine and unlock the potential in even the most basic things. And that's the beauty of creativity. It gives us the power to decide what something becomes and allows us to shape our journey far beyond its original meaning.
One pint should do. Nice. Not bad.